Welcome to Speaker, the television arm of Freemasonry throughout New Zealand. I am Barry Rushton, your host, and we have a great show for you this evening. Our special guest this evening is Donald Trott. Donald is here this evening to tell us about his wonderful career in opera in New Zealand. Our second guest this evening will be Brian Crone. He will talk to us about Blends New Zealand and the Freemasons Park. And following that, to end the show, will be our regular contributor, Graham Houston. Donald, I am so pleased that you accepted the invitation to be here this evening. You are a very famous man. I know you won't admit to that.
I certainly will not.
But in the opera world in New Zealand, you are so well known. In fact, you know, I'm sure you won't mind me saying that in 2000, you were awarded by the government at the time with an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit, correct?
That is
for
correct.
Services to opera. What a great, interesting life you've had and are having. You know, in our time in the teenage years, when we grew up, you know, boys like myself wanted to be in a band, or you wanted to sing like Elvis Presley. But you turned to opera. Tell us how you got into that and what you were thinking about getting into opera singing.
Well, it's simply the fact, Barry, that I've always wanted to be a singer from a very early age. And the opportunities were, particularly from my prep school choir, which I really enjoyed tremendously, St George's Preparatory School in Whanganui. And it was wonderful being in that choir, and we learned so much from our very fine tutors in that time. Then I started taking singing lessons when I was at Whanganui Collegiate, and that was very good too. And I had a number of tutors throughout the country, actually, even as far as Christchurch, that taught me. I always wanted to sing opera, but there wasn't the opportunity. There was very little going on in the world of opera in New Zealand at that time. There were various people singing opera, of course, but there was the New Zealand Opera Company, which was started by Donald Munro way back in 1954. And sadly, that came to an end in 1981. And it was then in 1981 that Paul Person and Cyril Kellaway got together and formed Purcell Opera. And then from there I came to work in Auckland at the invitation of the then general manager of the Northern Building Society, and he said, if you come and work for me in Auckland, you'll be able to sing opera. Well, that clinched it for me. So I came here from Whanganui to Auckland, and he was as good as his word, and getting off for touring and so on was never a problem. It was absolutely wonderful being involved with that company over that period.
You see, because that's generally what happens, isn't it? I mean, because there's a lack of opportunity a lot of times, even in bands and stuff in the early days that we were in, I won't say you were forced to do another job, but generally you do a career or you take a job. And I know you had a lot of time in business financing and things like that. And so obviously to come to Auckland in that time must have been from Whanganui to Auckland, you must have loved it.
Oh, I did. It was wonderful. Yes, I did some work also with the Auckland Operatic Society in the days when His Majesty's Theatre was still there, and that was quite wonderful too, working with them. But my main interest, of course, was opera, and to be auditioned and given a role, or given roles in Purcell Opera, was wonderful. We always had to audition for each opera that came along. We did 3 or 4 a year. And as a bass baritone, there were some great opera roles that I was able to do, and I really loved it.
Now, you'll know this far better than I do in my research, but there was a number of combinations of organisations, opera organisations, to finally produce the New Zealand Opera Company, was it?
Yes, well, what really happened there, Barry, was the fact that Purcell Opera realised that to continue the way they were continuing probably wasn't a goer. And the Aotea Centre was coming on stream. In 1985, they were building the Aotea Centre. And at one of the annual general meetings of the Purcell Opera, I said, I believe that what we need to do is to start a new trust to facilitate opera in the Aotea Centre. So away we went, and we managed to get the name. Well, we started off Auckland Metropolitan Opera because I wasn't allowed to use the name Auckland Opera. A trust that existed wouldn't allow the use of the name. They said that professional opera has been tried so often in Auckland and failed, and you will too. So anyway, but when they saw we were so successful with the first opera, De Fledermaus, and we actually made a very good profit on that, they released the name.
Now, which was very fortuitous for you, I'm sure, right? Because it gave you time then to start thinking, or more seriously, about the operatic school down in Whanganui.
I'd always had a desire to get something going for our aspiring young opera singers that gave them rather than them having to raise money individually and singularly to go overseas without much knowledge about where they might be going or the background that they needed. The idea was, instead of sending them off individually, we'd bring the great singers perhaps from the past, but with a great record of teaching, to New Zealand to do the tutorials. And that seemed to me to be a much better way. So in 1993,
was it? Yep.
Yes, I went to Wanganui. And I knew that it would be a perfect place for it. It's a perfect city for that sort of thing, with its beautiful 1899 opera house. Perfect for the young singers to develop their talent in. The Wanganui Collegiate School, use of the entire campus for us, just live into the school, live, eat and drink opera development down there. And then, of course, the support of the local community. And I needed some money, and I went along to see the manager of the ANZ Bank and managed to get an interview with him. And I said to him, I would like an overdraft, please, sir. And he said to me, what do you want it for? And I said, to start an opera school.
And you would have said shuffle papers and sort of move
That's
things
right,
around.
and looked at the desk and, well, really. Well, anyway, to cut a long story short, he gave me the facility of a $10,000 overdraft facility, which I've never used.
Fantastic.
Never used. That's because of the wonderful support that the school has received from so many people.
It has to be a wonderful thing. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of the audience might say opera. Well, you know, really, I'm not necessarily into opera myself, but it's actually an avenue that allows budding young people to actually train their voice, to see if they have got a voice that they could use. Because the opportunities were never there in the 60s, 70s, 80s for people who had a decent voice to learn under proper tutelage.
Exactly, and that's why I started the school, and it's been very well supported, as I say, both by tutors and by music staff from throughout the country, top music staff, and by overseas international former opera singers who've now got all that wonderful talent to pass on to others, and they do it, and they do it superbly.
A couple of years ago, of course, you had Dame Kiritakana with, right? She came
yes,
down,
we did.
and from what I've read, she loved the school, she loved what you're doing. She gave she was teaching the students, I believe.
Yes, she took a master class.
Which is just superb.
Yes. Well, she was there for 4 days observing and talking to the students and inspiring them, of course. And I mean, the mere fact of her being there was an inspiration for them. So yes, it was great. Of course, at that stage, the Kiritakana Foundation were financial supporters of the school. But like everything, these things change. And when the Kiritakana Foundation stepped aside of the sponsorship, then the Freemasons Foundation took it up.
Fantastic. I believe the Solomeo boys, right? The two brothers and their cousin, they've been through your school.
They have
and
indeed,
they are doing so successfully well.
Well, you know, one evening I put on a concert after the Opera House concert. It was just sort of Sunday, and I said to all the staff and the students, look, if you come onto the stage, do anything you like and see what you think. You know, we'll just do a concert for the local people and invite them to come along. And they did, and they filled the Prince Edward Auditorium. And the boys came on and they did this gig that became Solomeo, which was wonderful. It went down with the audience extremely well. Yeah, it was great.
One little thing from your past, which I can't help but bring up because it does fascinate me. I do have a pilot's license, but I haven't flown for a long time. But in your early years, when you were flying around the country doing things, I believe you had a mishap in an airplane, right? You crashed and walked away unscathed, luckily. Right?
Yes.
I'd love to hear this story.
Well, that was an amazing situation. Of course, you will remember in the days of National Airways that we were in Hamilton with the former building society that I was working with. And we had a big meeting on the Friday, and on the Saturday morning we were to fly back to Wanganui in the days when the Fokker Friendships would come from Auckland and land in Hamilton, then Wanganui, and then go on to Wellington. We don't have anything like that now, but of course Air Chathams have stepped up wonderfully for us. But on this particular occasion, the Hamilton airport, we were out there at 8 o'clock, was absolutely shrouded in fog. You could hardly see across the side of the other side of the airfield. And anyway, all the flights were cancelled, and our options were to go back to Auckland and then catch a plane to Wellington and motor home. And the director, one of the directors that was with me, said, I'm not going to spend my time sitting around here or travelling around the country. I want to go home, hire a plane. So I duly did that, and the Commodore of the Aero Club sent across this beautiful, practically brand new Cessna aircraft, and we climbed on board. There were 3 of us and the pilot, of course. And we got to about 6,000 feet, and suddenly there was a shot of oil that came up across the windscreen, like you pressed your windscreen washer. And all this oil was spewing up through the cowling in the front of the plane. And I tapped the pilot on the shoulder and I said, "Is everything all right?" And he said, picked up the microphone and he was saying, "Mayday, mayday, mayday." Well, of course, I mean, we were above the fog. There was no fog. The fog had gone from the airport when we took off. But we were above the fog and you could see Mount Ruapehu and Mount Egmont protruding up. It was a beautiful day up there. Then we went down into the fog going down, and all I was watching was the altimeter as we went down. And I had hoped that we might have been able to get back to the airport. We were far too far away from that. And finally, we came out of the fog for a very short distance. The fog lifted slightly, and the plane headed for the top of a hill. It hit the top of the hill, and everything was ripped off, as you can imagine, propeller and everything else that was underneath. And then it started to turn over, but there was a sawn-off pine tree on the other side, and the starboard wing caught it and straightened the plane up, and it dived into the field and skidded along the grass into a barberry hedge just off the main trunk railway line. The plane, the port wing was on fire at that stage. And we, of course, scrambled out. I was looking around for my briefcase. The pilot said to me, "You get out of here, it's going to blow up," and which it duly did.
Unbelievable.
We were very, very, very lucky. It's amazing.
Extremely so. Well, it's a story that I really wanted to hear the details on.
Well, that was it.
Now, you've recently been in Freemasonry, I think only about 14 years, joined in about 2004, if I'm correct.
That's right,
and
yes.
you were Master of the Lodge of the Liberal Arts in 2010,
yes.
which is fantastic, and that's where I met you then. You
Yes.
bring people along to the refectory afterwards and
Yes.
have these great, the National Youth Orchestra playing, or members from it.
Yes.
So when you were thinking about Freemasonry, why did you join, and what was the great reason that you chose?
Well, I'll tell you why I joined. Helping us in New Zealand Opera in our Friends department, the Friends of the Opera, was a gentleman by the name of Tom Clark.
No, Tom.
And Tom was a very energetic and inspiring member of that group. And Tom said to me one day, he said, "Have you ever thought of becoming a Freemason?" And I said, well, my grandfather was a Freemason, and so was my father. Father less so than grandfather. Anyway, time passed, and once again he reminded me, and ultimately I completed the application form and went through the three degrees to become a Master Mason. I've never regretted it. My only regret when I stepped down in my speech at the end of my tenure, which was not your year as Master, but nearly 2 years. I kept reminding them of that. I said my biggest regret is the fact that I didn't join Freemasonry earlier.
Fantastic.
That's my biggest regret, and I hold to that.
Well, it's great that you remember. It's great to have you here. Thank you for this evening. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you. Bye. My next guest is Brian Crone. Hello, Brian.
Barry.
Nice
great
to see you, mate. Thank you for coming and taking the time out to be here this evening.
It's my pleasure, Barry.
Brian, there's I know that within Freemasonry that you hold a position that a lot of people never do, and it's a position called the Divisional, which is the part of New Zealand Grand Almoner. Now, the Grand Almoner is a person who obviously takes care of people. In a normal lodge, of course, the almoner will sort of take care of the members or their wives or widows that might be around, and look for possible projects that could actually happen within their local district. But you've got a huge area, and so there are a number of projects that must come past you or past a group of you, make a decision that something effort is worthwhile somewhere. And I believe there's one special one that you either inherited or have taken over, which I know that you have a great interest in.
I'll take it from that, Barry. You're referring to the project that was undertaken in South Auckland of Blends, which is the Blind and Low Vision Education Network of New Zealand, a national school for the children being afflicted with blindness or low vision. And they are based at the campus in South Auckland, in Homai, and of course a lot of our older people will know that it was formerly the Homai School for Blind.
Yeah.
That particular project, yes, in my current role I wasn't involved in it, but prior to to my appointment, the Freemasons in South Auckland have been known for a lot of social travelling and get-togethers, and over the years, on a number of our trips, we've always had a project that we wanted to support, and invariably, as I'm sure you're aware, that all our lodges are made up of men, and they come up with ideas. This particular exercise, we took the approach, well, we'll ask our ladies,
Great.
is there something they'd like to support?
Yeah.
I'm a married man, as I'm sure a number are, and that suggestion can actually be fraught with difficulties. And we challenged a very prominent lady within the district, Mrs. Jan Cooper, whom I'm sure you know is the wife of a former Grand Master, to go and find something that the boys would be happy to support. Well, not so much the boys will be happy to support, that the boys will support.
Yeah.
So really from there we started putting the planning in motion. Now my comment about our ladies, I mean, I think from my point of view, I thought, oh yes, we can put a swing or two in and it'll be quite pretty, and the boys will feel very pleased. During that development, the budgets were, moving from, say,
$500,000 to...
Well, it went up to 1.6 million to start with, and then to bring the thing back and see. But the focus was what was going to be of ultimate benefit to the maximum benefit for the users of that facility.
Have you heard back from, I'm sure you have, from the Blends, the organisers or the people behind how it runs, the success of the park? Have the blind people taken to it? They use it a lot? It's become part of their life?
It is totally part of their life. The stories, and I hear them regularly. I'm in relatively constant contact with them.
Yep.
It has changed lives.
Great.
It is an area where children never used to venture. Now you can't get them out of it.
Fantastic. Back to yourself. I know that work that you do now obviously seeps through you, and that makes you proud to be part of the Freemason organisation as well as what you're contributing here. But there was a period in your Freemason life where you actually stopped because you were doing other things, but you've now been in it since about 2003, I believe, in somewhere in that area. So obviously it's probably silly of me to ask, but obviously there's something about this Freemason organisation that makes you proud, makes you what you are, makes you want to do. What's the big thing that you think Freemason's given you, apart from humbleness and apart from,
Well, Barry, when I joined Freemasonry in my early 20s, it was in the days when it was very private, and I guess then I was quite nosy, and I wanted to see what was over the fence.
Like all of us, yeah.
But as we all know, that you hear about making good man, better man, but it is your self-development.
Yeah.
And that's where I think I get personally the greatest satisfaction in that I've been able to be involved in things, not necessarily from my own skills or otherwise, that have stretched me.
Right.
And the organisation does that.
Well, we're glad that you're back, let me tell you that right now. Time's up, my friend. Thank you very, very much for being our guest today. It's been great. That work that you're doing and the members of the lodges involved is really superb. I know there's a number of those kind of projects, I won't say similar to that, but projects on the go all the time, but that is a real beauty.
It's my pleasure, and it is my privilege to be in the role that I am.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Barry.
Finishing off the show this evening is our regular contributor, Graham Houston. Graham, it is always good to see you.
Thanks, Barry.
Now, I know that we've had 5 of these shows have gone now, and you've spoken about some famous Freemasons. They have, however, all been dead.
Correct.
Now, there are so many well-known Freemasons who are alive, and I believe you've got a guy today which you want to talk about.
This one is very much alive. He's a very big name, particularly in the United States of America. And he's a young guy, comparatively young for Freemasons. 48-year-old Brad Paisley. Very, very big name in the United States and parts of Europe and Scandinavia.
He's a country singer,
A
correct?
country singer
Well-known
and a
country singer.
country songwriter as well.
And a very active Freemason.
A very active
Both-
Freemason. He started his singing when he was about 8 years old. He made his first recording when he was 13. He wrote his first song when he was 13. And incidentally, that is part of the Christmas compilation album that he put together, and went on to sell in excess of 12 million albums.
I think it's important, Graham, that we tell our viewers that how famous this guy is. He's had 32 top 10 singles, 19 of them reached #1.
That's correct.
Incredible.
And that's #1 on the United States Billboard Country Airplay.
That's right.
And all of those have been certified gold, disc
Incredible.
or higher. He, in 2009, created a record by having the most consecutive #1 hits on that USA
Which is-
Billboard charts.
He's well
He
known.
had 10. So he's very big. In fact, he's just completed a tour of the United States, sellout. He's just come back earlier this year of Scandinavia and Sweden, sellout tours.
Incredible.
So he has a very good sense of humour, which has seen him host TV comedy shows and be part of other people's comedy shows as well.
He's a big machine, isn't he? I mean, he's got clothing, he's got bits and
brand.
pieces.
Glad you mentioned that. Right here, I have my favourite piece of apparel. These are Brad Paisley
Cowboy
branded
boots.
cowboy boots.
Wow.
So he's even got endorsements that big. So he is in a big way. So with 12 million albums sold and growing, plus three Grammy Awards, and plus 14 through the Country Awards, and he's still accumulating them. But there's a couple of interesting stories. I want to tell you one of them. He met his current wife, Kimberly, when he went to see a movie in which she starred called The Seven Brides. And he, as the story goes, and it's always as stories go, thought, that's the girl I'll marry. And he went back and saw that several times. Well, he wrote a song and put together a music video with it, and he invited her to be part of that music video. The song is
Spun
called...
the web. Did he spin the
He
web?
spun the web. The song is called I'm Gonna Miss Her.
I'm going to miss it.
And you need to have a sense of humour, a slightly quirky sense of humour, to really appreciate the song. And
I'll listen to it.
you listen to
I
it,
will.
and I'd like you to listen to it. And if you've got that sense of humour, a little bit of a quirky sense of humour, listen to it, and then tell me if you think the same as I do. It's a funny song, and it really is.
Which lodge did he join, or as a member of?
He's a member of the Hiram Lodge in Tennessee. Hiram Lodge #7 was one of the 9 lodges in the North Carolina, Tennessee area back in about 1796 that were formed. It has a very interesting history. It's a 3-story building. It is now a National Heritage building in the United States. It's seen civil wars. In fact, during the Civil War, many of the records from the Hiram #7 Lodge were lost. Okay. It was subjected to Union cannon fire, musket fire, so it was damaged and had to be restored. It's a building that's been used by every organisation in the town of Frankton. It was used by every church until they built their own church buildings. It's been used as a courthouse. It's always been used as a lodge. And in fact, if my information's correct, that building is the longest in-use lodge building anywhere in the United States.
Wow.
Continuous use in the United States. Brad, with his father, Brad is a 32 degree Freemason, his father 33. They're very active in the Shriners, and they're very active right throughout the Scottish Rite. 2 of his band members are also Masons. Another band member completed his 32 degree with Brad Paisley at the same time. The lodges over there, particularly the jurisdiction of Tennessee, tend to use Brad Paisley to promote the organisation. And if you go onto the YouTube and have a look under Brad Paisley, you will find some promotional videos that they actually do use.
Fantastic.
for
So he speaks out, doesn't he?
He speaks out for
which-
Freemasonry, which is the
Fantastic.
very thing that we're doing here in New
Exactly.
Zealand as well.
And you know how famous he is when he can attract people like Mick Jagger, John Fogerty to be a guest people on his last album, which I think is called Love and War, if I think is his final one. War and Love, I think it's called.
Well, there are songs that are written, that are played by some pretty well-known people that have been written by Brad Paisley. Now, you'll be familiar with the Pixar movie studios Cars franchise. Well, on that Cars movie, there are 3 songs in there which he wrote, and a 4th one which he co-wrote. Okay. So you don't see his name always in the light, but he is one of the people young people coming into Freemasonry who, in my opinion, live by the tenets and principles of Freemasonry, as they should be. And to the extent where the Grand Lodges are prepared to use him as the face of Lodge to do that.
Well, a good choice, Graham, for a living, breathing, alive, famous Freemason.
Yes. Another claim to fame is that in 2015 he went with President Obama to Afghanistan to entertain the troops.
Wow.
And as a result of that, he was given a particular souvenir. Now, in his home, he has a fabulous bar. If you look at it, you would think you are in a very posh hotel. And it is, he says, it's the only bar in the world where you can go and order a bourbon and have it served in an Air Force One glass.
Little memento from the plane.
Memento from President Obama, yes.
Graham, a great choice, mate. A living, breathing, famous Freemason, speaks out for Freemasonry. We don't know him that well here, of course, but he's well known throughout the world.
Very well
Wonderful
known,
choice.
particularly.
Thank you, Graham.
See you next week.
That's our show for this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. If you would like to know more about Freemasonry, please do go to the Freemasons website, which is freemasonsnz.org, or the telephone number below, and you can ask any question that you would like to know. So until next week, see you again.